Welcome back to the Sweatshop, boys and girls. Today we're going to be working on a 2002 Honda CRV. In today's video on the CRV, we're going to be showing you how to replace two of the mounts that hold the transmission and engine in the vehicle. This one specifically is the transmission mount itself that goes right where the earbox is, and this guy here is the transmission mount that is in the front of the vehicle. This one, when you try to look it up online, is usually either a transmission or engine mount, but it's almost always called a front mount followed by engine or transmission. So can be a little bit confusing, but it's the same goddamn mount. Now you'll notice this one has two holes that mount it to the transmission. This is specifically for the automatic. The manual has 3 bolt holes that hold it to the vehicle for the front mount. This guy here, as far as I remember, is the same for the manual and the automatic, but I'm not 100% sure, so definitely check it out for your vehicle. These aren't the hardest thing to change, but they can be a little bit of a pain in the ass. There are a few tips and tricks that you should know, which I'm going to show you in this video so that you don't have a headache when you try to change these out for yourself. Now, how do you know that you need an engine mount? Well, in my previous starter video, you would have heard some clanging, which could be misconstrued as a possible bad mount, but it isn't. I'll show you what a bad mount sounds like. I'm currently in the driver's seat of the vehicle and about to start this thing. What I want you guys to listen for, and hopefully it's picked up on camera, is a little bit of a grumbling sound when the vehicle comes to life. You can hear it as I start the vehicle. Basically, it sounds as though there is a little bit of a metal on metal contact sort of sound on the left side. And how I've isolated the transmission mount is you can feel it in the floor of the driver's side. And then when you look at the mount, you'll see it's completely tore up. Now here's another way to test this thing. Start the vehicle up. Put your foot on the brake. Accelerate a little bit with it in gear and you can hear that grumbling. That grumbling is an indicator that you have a bad mount. Now put it in reverse and you'll hear much the same. You can also hear it pop or jolt. Now watch when I put it back in reverse. If you heard that kick, that is an indication there that you have a bad mount. It's hard to see from this angle here, but that mount is destroyed. Of course, we're going to have to remove most of this crap in order to get to that mount. Now, I'm going to try and attempt to do this without removing the airbox or the battery. Generally, how I usually do it is just to remove the fuse box and just plop it over to the side. Makes your life a little bit easier. But there are these little plastic tabs here. Get a pocket-sized screwdriver like this and then force these plastic tabs toward the fuse box and then just gently pull up. There's another one in the back here that you'll have to get to, and then there's also another one over here. Now with your fuse box dislodged, there is a clip over here that you'll have to also dislodge to get this main wire away from that metal bracket. Just work it out slowly. Whatever you do, don't break it. There we go. And now you can just sort of set this guy aside here. Now with your fuse box sort of out of the way like this, you can see here that we can sort of see the bolts there. There's one bolt there and there's another bolt down there and there. And then there's this really long one here that we'll have to access. Nobody can see shit like that, Jimmy. Now with your fuse box out of the way, you can see the top bolt here is exposed. There are 2 other bolts on the side of this thing and one really long one that comes out this way. The issue with that long bolt is that there is the battery tray in the way. So the metal portion of the battery tray is going to be blocking this bolt here from coming out. So what we need to do is remove our battery next. If you like this ratchet, there is a link in the description below. Oh my god, this clip is so strong. Now with our battery out of the way, you can see there are a few clips and pieces that we need to remove from the battery tray, specifically these lines here that are held in place. There is also these 12mm bolts here. There are 2 of them on the top here, as well as 2 of them on the sides, which we'll need to send the car up for in order to access. So the first thing you want to start with is removing the cables. Flat screwdriver is all you need, that and working hands. If you can't remember where half this stuff is, make sure you do yourself a favor and take a photo. Come on, let go. There we go. Now we have another one here, but this one can't be accessed from this side here. We have to get it from the bottom. But of course, before we get to the bottom or send this thing up, we're going to take these 3 bolts here. 1, 2, and 3 out. Thankfully, they look worse than they actually are. So luckily, I was able to get this little black tab out of here. This one here that holds the harness to the battery tray. You gotta take your time and really work in there. You won't have much of an issue because you won't have a camera tripod in the way. So you'll be able to use your arm like this instead of trying to hug the camera. That's why I couldn't show you it on screen. Now let's send this thing up, get those 2 bolts out of the way, and then we can fire these bolts out and get that mount out of there. Now Honda being Honda, they do some brilliant things. The battery tray is held in by these 2 bolts here now. Those are the only 2 bolts that are remaining, but Honda is brilliant because there is a slot at the bottom of either side. So you don't need to remove the bolts completely. You just need to back them off a couple of threads and you can pull this whole assembly out. Now usually I would do this with a really long extension and a swivel socket, but because my camera is in the way and I am doing this for YouTube, I will be using a flex head ratcheting wrench to get in from the side here. Fucking compressor. So just loosen that up a bit. And then do the other side. Oh. Now, of course, with our battery tray loose, we can go ahead and tackle that other mount. But before we put the car down, what we're going to do is take care of this mount here. What we need to do is loosen up this 17mm bolt here, and there's also a 17mm bolt. How do I get my hand in there? There's also a 17mm bolt right up here. Then there's this guy right there. Now, in order to do this, if you're doing this on the floor, you will need to, of course, employ the use of jack stands, but you'll need to have a free jack as well so that you can position the engine and transmission in the correct place so that you can thread the bolts back in. Now, let's go ahead and start taking these guys off. Just grab your 17mm and crank. Yeah. Don't hit the camera. Ah, fucking camera's in the way. Once you get it loose, you can switch to the ratcheting end and then just ratchet this one out first. Oh yeah, don't hit the camera. Now, don't ratchet it out all the way because what will happen is your ratchet will get stuck. So pull the ratchet out and then proceed to do it with an open end wrench or by hand if it's loose enough. Now the key to success, boys and girls, is to always do this bottom bolt first, because if you do any of the other ones, you'll never be able to crank this out by hand. So if you don't do this one first, you'll give yourself an enormous headache. Now get a flex socket, 1/2-inch gun, and hammer out this guy here. Slide your gun out and the bolt. Now, of course, your next step is going to be getting that top bolt, which is a pain in the ass. The best way I can tell you to get this thing is to get a ratchet and a deep socket that'll fit in this region here where my index finger is. And then you can ratchet it out like this here. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe I'll just show you. Okay, 1/2-inch 17mm socket deep. Get it on that top bolt. Maybe a flex head ratchet would have been a little bit of a better idea. Yeah, let's trade this in for a flex head. Get a ginormous flex head ratchet. There we go. And now, just crank it loose. Now, be very careful. There's the petcock for your radiator. So when you're trying to break that top bolt over here loose, if you hit that thing, you're gonna break it, which will cost you an arm and a leg because you'll be replacing a radiator. So be very careful when breaking that thing loose. Now what I'm going to do is off camera, just gonna work this out by hand or with an open end wrench. Oh, fuck, there we go. Okay, with that guy loose and out of the way, the hardest part now is going to be to get it out of the car. There's not much room, and there's also a harness on top here that is going to be in your way. I'll be back, boys and girls. What you need to do is get this guy out of the way, this hose. So disconnect this piece here, and then there is a 10mm over here that you'll disconnect. Come on, come on. Get the bolt out. With this guy out of the way, what you want to do now is push the mount up and then pull it out towards the radiator fan. Then twist it at 90 degrees. With it twisted at 90 degrees like so, what you're going to do is slowly work it out of the car by pushing it over past that harness, and then keep working it. Pull this guy over and then just slide it out over here on this side. Okay, boys and girls, you can see there why we are replacing this mount. Now, of course, the next step is the joy of putting this new mount in there. Make sure that you put the chunky bit at the bottom and the skinnier portion up top. Remember, put it in at 90 degrees to the way it should be, and then just work it into place. And don't hit the camera. Oh. Easy does her. Okay, now stand it up a bit, and then sneak it in. There we go, boys and girls. That's how you put it in. Now give yourself an alcoholic beverage or something to reward yourself with, like a candy or I don't know, something that'll make you happy. Now we're going to do this in reverse. What you want to do is push the mount up, get your bottom bolt in first, and thread it in by hand. Then go ahead, grab the top bolt and sneak that in. Remember, always catch these bolts by hand, because if you drive them in and they're not put in properly and you cross thread them, you're going to have a really, really bad day. Take your 17mm socket, place it on the top. I'm going to run those up by hand some more off camera because this is a useless shot. Now, in order to line up that center bolt hole there when you have your bolts snugged up, what you're going to do is employ the use of a jack or a stand. Before you place a jack or stand underneath the transmission, get a nice piece of chunky wood or 2x4 and just place it in between the metal and your stand or jack, whichever one you choose to use. Then go ahead and slowly crank up on it. You will start to see your mount lift. Once you can see a clear hole where your bolt will go through, go ahead and put your bolt through. Of course, before you put it back into use, make sure you anti-seize the hell out of it. Then on the other side, you'll have your captive nut. Make sure that you line that guy up and then thread your bolt in. Now we can go ahead and torque all those bolts and our front mount will be done. Now what we're going to do is torque these two bolts here, this guy and this top one here to 33 foot-pounds or 44 Newton meters. In order to get to this bottom one here, what you're going to do is get a deep socket with a 1-inch extension and just shove it through this little hole here. It's not long enough, damn it. We're going to have to get a 3-inch extension. In order to get the bottom bolt, you'll need a 3-inch extension and a deep 17mm socket. Then remove your extension and torque the top bolt. And now, the last bolt for us to torque is this guy here. The torque spec for that bolt is 47 foot-pounds or 64 Newton meters. That's it. Our front mount is all installed. All we need to do now is put that 10mm back that retains that ATF line. Of course, remember, a little dab of anti-seize goes a long way. Thread this guy in by hand as best you can. The hardest part's going to be lining this guy up. Okay. Oh, come on. There we go. Once you thread it in by hand just a little bit, you can go ahead and tighten it up with your ratchet. That's that, boys and girls. Now we can finally commence with removal of the battery tray and that top mount. Before you lower the car, don't forget to take your jack out underneath the transmission or whatever support method that you used, and then lower the car. Now we can go ahead and pull this thing out. With that guy out of the way, we can go ahead and remove our mount. Now, with this mount, it supports a lot of the engine's weight, so it is imperative that you support or take the weight off of the mount prior to removing it, of course. Well, that's great. So look at that, boys and girls. Looks like we're going to be fixing the ground wire as well. Yay! Okay, back to the program. Now what we're going to do is get our jack, that piece of wood, and slowly take the pressure off of this mount. Now remember, we're just trying to take a little bit of pressure off. With the pressure off of the mount, we can go ahead now and remove the 4 bolts that hold it. There's one here, another one on the back there, and then this through bolt here. They're all 17mm bolts. Remove the through bolt first. And go ahead, get this top bolt. Then get a 4-inch, half-inch extension. And you can remove that back bolt first. Don't remove the easy one. Always remove the hard ones first. Oh, the socket's kind of tight in there. Well, boys and girls, that's the end of the flex socket. We'll get the deep socket with an extra long extension and hit that thing from the top. So I got a 1/2-inch deep socket with a 10-inch extension. Just slide it down in there on top of the bolt and then hammer it out. Thank God the bolt actually fell on the floor. Now we can go ahead and get that front one as well. There we go, boys and girls. Our stupid mount is out of there. There you can see, boys and girls, our mount is out of there. Wiggle it out and get the remnants of the mount out. There you go, boys and girls. That's why we're hearing all this grinding and gurring sound. This mount is, for lack of a better term, so what's causing the gurring sound essentially is this portion of the metal shaft that's here is grinding on that portion there of the mount. And this, my friend, well, these are, I don't know what the hell they do, but this guy here is completely blown out, as you can see. This guy was hindering me from putting my socket on in the back there. Anyhow, boys and girls, let's go and swap this out for a good mount. Now we can go ahead and sneak our new mount into place. It would help if I put it in the right way. Twist this guy around. And just sneak it in there. Now you can see we did absolutely nothing in terms of adjusting the height, and currently there is a 1/2 inch difference with regards to the height on the transmission side mount. That shows you how bad that old mount was. So now what we're gonna do is just elevate the mount or the engine and transmission by jacking it up and sneak the mount into place, and now you can secure the mount with the bolts. Of course, make sure that you anti-seize the hell out of them. What I like to do is sneak the through bolt in first, just because it tends to make life easier. Let's go up a little bit more. Okay, there we go. Thread it in by hand as far as you can. Then go ahead and put your short bolts in. Now, if for whatever reason it's extremely hard for you to get your bottom bolts in, what you can do is, of course, employ the use of a pry bar. Of course, keep in mind, this should be easy to get in. You shouldn't have to pry on it extremely hard. If you do, something's wrong. Take a look at what may be going on and try to correct it. I'm putting minimal pressure on this thing and we're able to get that bolt in. Now the tricky one is going to be that back bolt. I don't even know if it's a point to me showing you on camera. Essentially what we're going to do is employ the use of this guy here and try to sneak it into place. Now, I'll tell you, boys and girls, it is a pain in the ass sometimes to get these bolts bolts to line up. So what you might have to do if you have gotten your parts from China, as most of these things come from China now, you might have to drill them out because their quality of work isn't really the best. Even though this is a good mount or a reputable brand name, most stuff that is made offshore in terms of engine mounts don't tend to be the best of quality. Now, that being said, I was lucky enough not to have to do that. I did have to use my pry bar quite a bit in order to get this stupid thing to line up. Anyhow, we're now at the point where we can go ahead and torque these things. The torque spec for the bolts that mount to the body is 33 foot-pounds or 44 newton meters. Okay, and now we can go ahead and torque our through bolt to 47 foot-pounds or 64 newton meters. With that guy torqued down, we can now remove our jack. You can see there, boys and girls, our mount barely moved, which means it's good. Go ahead and put the fuse box back in place. And now, because I went fixing stuff in this region, our ground cable, which is obviously weak, fell apart. So what we're going to do now is clean all that up, get the piece that it fell off of, and solder it back. Now with our ground cable mended back together, we can go ahead and put this thing back into the car and then put our battery tray back where it needs to be. Okay, boys and girls, finally we can sneak this thing back into place. Oh man, Jimmy, again. If you're gonna put it back in the right way, not like how I first did it. And now we can finally sneak this guy back into place. Make sure your cable or harness is not hooked up anywhere, and then just work it back into place. Perfect. Now put these guys back in. Always thread these things in by hand, never just gun them on, because if you cross thread them, you'll have a very bad day. Now just fire them back home. If you're looking for a torque spec on those guys, I'd say 15 foot-pounds should be a good enough spec. Now, before we go ahead and send the car up so we can tighten up the two bottom bolts, we're going to finish everything else back up over here. So, go ahead and grab the clips for the harness and just put them back into the holes where they belong. They're a bit challenging to go on. WD-40, my friend. All right, just make sure all your wires are in place, double check your clips, and now you can go ahead and start putting your battery back. Of course, start off with the tray. You can see here that there is a marking for front. That's what the FR stands for, and then there is an arrow, so make sure you don't mix it up. Then grab your battery, put it in place, double check the tray, grab this guy, your battery insulator, and sneak it into place. Now, grab your battery tie down, put in the hook first, and then the 10 mil on the front here. Oh, looks like I gotta loosen this guy up. Tighten that guy up, and then finally the hook. Give it the wiggle test and make sure it's all good, and then you can go ahead, put your terminals on. Always put your positive terminal on first. Whatever you do, do not over tighten it. Put that clip in, and then finally your ground cable. Do your wiggle test to make sure your terminals are both tight, as well as your battery, and boys and girls, we are good to go. Now let's see if all that hard work paid off. Oh boy, she sounds better already. Apply your left foot to the brake, put it into gear, step on the accelerator just a bit. That's a good sign. I don't hear any grumbling. Put it in drive. Woo! Seems fairly quiet to me, boys and girls. And you can hear it's not jolting into gear anymore. So I think it's safe to say that this thing is fixed. Now, of course, the last step for us would be to put this splash shield back on, but I've got a few more repairs to make on this Honda, so we're gonna leave it off. Of course, if you're not doing anything else to yours, go ahead and put that splash shield back on. Check it out, boys and girls. Doesn't that brand new mount look awesome in there? I think that's a thumbs up for me. Giggity giggity. Well, boys and girls, that's all she wrote for this one. If you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss one of my new videos. And as always, thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one. The manual has... Well, someone thinks it's a raceway back there. I'm currently sitting inside the driver's seat of the vehicle. That sounded stupid. If you heard that kick, that is an indication that your battery... Oops. Oh, it's fucking recording. Don't record. Now, usually if I were doing this, I would just remove either the air box or the fuse box here. But because I'm not going to be able to really film this, yeah, maybe we can do it with just the air box. I don't know. I'll be back, boys and girls. Why aren't you coming off, you little dick? Like so. Get a pocket-sized screwdriver and just force them back towards the fuse box and... Fuse box? What the fuck's wrong with me? I will be using a flex socket, or no. And you'll want to throw this into your face, into your eyeball, and hopefully that's not fucking right. Now go ahead and hit it. The easiest thing I can tell you, or the easiest, it's blocked on the fucking rad fan, you cocksucker, you. Okay, you know what? We're just gonna move this fucker out of the way and make my life easier. Now, the hardest part of this job is to get rid of this guy here, is to get it off of the fucking... What the fuck am I saying? Just start this shit all over again. The only thing I can tell you is there are two pieces that are... Oh my god. Try not to get your gloves stuck on everything. Now we can go ahead and... Aw, don't be making fucking noises, Gimbal. Making more fucking high-pitched noises. Shut the fuck up. Go ahead, put the fuse box back. Yep. That's what the FR stands on. Step on the accelerator a little bit. What did I just say? Yep. Oh my god.